Okay, so yesterday we were discussing America. We started our discussion with what we call as age of discovery. How did the age of discovery come through? We understood the decline of feudalism, then the Renaissance, the Reformation, the scientific revolution, modern sciences, how that allowed for the age of discovery to develop independently without church's intervention. Thereafter, we tried to understand how was America colonized, and we concentrated our effort towards the what we call as the colonies, which are the British American colonies, which is a small area in the eastern coast of North America. We also saw that it was not economically viable, and therefore there was a need to connect it with the larger story of world history or the larger story of the British Empire. And therefore, two things the British did. First was to integrate it into the triangular trade, and through the triangular trade, they were able to make America viable. On the other hand, we also saw how they introduced what are called navigation acts, and the navigation acts were important in generating certain amount of revenue from this sector, which was very important vis-a-vis generating certain amount of money or profit or exploitation which the British wanted from the Americas. Now, the most important concept which we stopped yesterday was that it was a win-win situation for both of them till 1756. Before 1756, it was a win-win situation wherein they were not minding the exploitation because they were getting connected to the world economy. On the other hand, the British had not invested too much in America. Therefore, whatever revenue was generated was enough. However, the Austrian War of Succession, which had already happened in 1740-48, the same issue recurred again in the form of what we call as the 7 Years' War. And the 7 Years' War was the turning point in the relationship of British America and England. And the difference is the fact that the 7 Years' War increased the expenditure of the British on America. And the concept was very simple. They now wanted more because they had invested more. So they had only generated a certain amount of revenue. The national debt, the British national debt had increased quite a lot. In order to protect the Americans, they had taken a lot of money from people. They had sent a lot of arms and ammunition, and therefore they wanted more out of America. So the point at which we stopped yesterday was there were two things, which is that the British American attitude, there was a change because of the Enlightenment plus the 7 Years' War. The cumulative impact of this was that there was a change in the attitude, and they started to question the relationship, wanted what we call as civil liberties, and on the other hand, the British attitude also changed. Here, the concept is that they were now thinking themselves as Americans rather than British Americans. On the other hand, the British attitude changed in the way that the 7 Years' War increased the expenditure, and with increased expenditure, they wanted more out of the American colonies. So, why only 7 years war? Much at this point, so many wars happened because the 7 Years' War spilled over into the New World. No other war till this point has spilled over in the New World. It is only this war which spilled over into the New World. So this is where we stopped yesterday. I hope you remember this point. And if you do, 7 Years' War, Austrian War Secession fought in America, also like in India. No, Austrian War Secession was in India and Europe. 7 Years' War was in India, Europe, and America. What led to the emergence of Enlightenment when British Americans were happy? Enlightenment, if again this is called Gajni effect, Enlightenment started in France. And France, there were philosophers which very simply started to talk about, out of frustration for absolutist monarchy, started to talk about the concept of democracy, social contract, and the concept of civil liberties, separation of law, separation of powers, and etc. etc. So, do we remember till this point? Because if we do, I would like to take the story forward, finish American Revolution, and start French Revolution. I want everybody's yes, because this is where we stopped yesterday, which was an attitudinal change when it comes to how we see the Americans. Okay. Before 1492, America existed, but Europe did not accept it. America existed, yes. Europe did not know it existed. Okay. Now, I'll do one thing, which is that I'll make a causes of American Revolution slide, so that later when you revise you can just refer to this slide itself. When we talk about the causes of the American Revolution, we've discussed three causes till this point. The first cause which we've discussed is the Enlightenment, which changed the American attitudes and gave them new words like freedom, liberty, and representation. The second cause which we've discussed is the 7 Years' War, which increased the expenditure of the British exponentially, or rather we'll say increase the expenditure and national debt of Britain. And third, we will say British attitude towards American colonies changed. They wanted to extract more. Anybody has any issue in these three? See, this is how you write in the examination also. I am literally writing down the notes for you, and this is how you write in the examination also. Point wise, very straightforward. Navigation Act, if you want to introduce, you can write about them, but Navigation Act will be the introduction rather than the causes. We have discussed three causes. Anybody has any issue? Can I take the story forward? Everyone, come on. Okay. Perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Now, additionally, we had hierarchy of feudalism, king, lord, knights, peasant while in the class. Smita, go with what I have told you. Don't worry. That has been given from a different perspective. That's a very, very, very specific type of German and French thing. Don't worry. Go with what I told you. Okay. I'll tell you what is the role of George the Third. I'm coming to that, Mega. I've not introduced that person. The George the Third and Lord North are the two basic points. Do second point cause to overexploitation? Abhijit, I'm coming to that. Now we have to see the after effects. George the Third, see, George the Third and the Prime Minister, who's Lord North, are the two major personalities which are going to negotiate on the part of the British. And they are the ones who are going to basically mess it up. So, what I want from you is an assertion that this makes sense, because then I will add to it, and that is what we have to go forward. You have to see the consequence of this also. Okay. Now, consequences of the changed attitude, the further causes of the American Revolution. Who's responsible for Third Kinetic War in India? Shoyab, that's a modern India question, not relevant here. I don't know who responsible. Britain and France were responsible for the Third Kinetic War. Okay. Yes, this is yesterday's class. I always do this 10 to 15 minutes first. I revise. Revision is done. Now we go forward. This point forward, you don't know. So you have to concentrate from this point forward. Now, we have established one thing, which is that the British want more. And the characteristic of exploitation before 1756 was that it was merchant taxation, and it was more or less trade regulation, out of which they used to get custom duties. Now tell me one thing. If there's a tax which is on merchants, does it impact the whole society? No. So for example, today I say that I've increased the import duty by 10-20%. It would impact maybe the prices of the commodities which are there in the market, but does not impact you automatically, because you are not a merchant. Maybe 10-20-30% of the society could get affected, but merchant based taxation is limited in scope. So if I have land and I am producing crops, if I am a slave owner and I have a plantation, merchant based taxation would really not affect me. So there is indirect impact, no direct impact. But now from 1756, the British want more. And the first manifestation of this new attitude comes even before the war ends, and they're called writ of assistance. Again, don't have to remember it, but writ of assistance is that, see, if you remember, there were two clauses. I'll show you the map also. There were two clauses in the Navigation Act. The clause was that you cannot trade with the rest of the world on your own. You have to go via England. This was the most important two acts, that you have to go import or export via England. Now, what the Americans used to do was that in order to bypass this system, they used to rather trade with the Caribbean colonies, which is that if I have to give certain things to the French, I would not go to France to give it, rather hand it over to the French colonies and the Spanish colonies and the Portuguese colonies in the Caribbean islands itself. That was much easier, and that was much more profitable. And this is basically called smuggling. You are going against what is allowed, and therefore it is called smuggling. So the British, what they did was that the first thing which they tried to do was to control and regulate smuggling, because smuggling was a type of leakage which was leading them to lose a lot of money. So they will ask the merchant, they're called writ of assistance, basically search warrants. So they could search any ship to check if it was going to the French colonies or not. And therefore, the British already showed that they are trying to regulate smuggling in that regard. Now, by 1755, no, not 1755, 1765, 64, 65, they will also do a small amendment which shows a change in the British attitude, and that is called the Molasses Act. Molasses. What is molasses? What is molasses? Yes, molasses is basically nothing but jaggery. In between sugarcane and jaggery, you have molasses. Good, which is basically once you burn molasses more and more, you will get sugar crystals. So molasses is a important raw material for a sugar industry. So under the Molasses Act, which was introduced in the 1600s itself, there was equality. Basically, a British American molasses producer or seller or sugar producer, he had multiple options, which is that he could buy or sell from the English, from the French, or the Spanish. He could actually buy molasses or sell molasses to any of these three. All of them are available in that same Caribbean island sector. However, the simple straightforward point is that the Molasses Act was amended in 1764-63 period, that end period, wherein what the British argued was that if you buy from the English, there is no duty or no cess. On the other hand, if you buy from the Spanish and the Portuguese, you will have to give 6 pence a gallon duty on it. Can anybody tell me why would the British put a duty on French and Spanish molasses? Yes, Sumit, it's the same thing. You will find a lot of similarities. Very good. Basically, they wanted to encourage English producers and on the other hand, tax the other ones so that they could also gain more money, but basically encourage the English. So you can see that the English were now playing with a lot of things in order to get more and more money. So they tried to control smuggling so that their revenue could go up. And here, George the Third and Lord North, who are the king and prime minister, they were quite aggressive. George the Third had a very straightforward concept that I want now the Americans to pay for what we had done for them in the 7 Years' War. So, till this point, you can still understand one thing, that would the Molasses Act impact everyone? Would the Molasses Act impact everyone? No, it is still an indirect form of impact or indirect form of taxation because you're still taxing the molasses merchant. However, the blunder will happen in 1765. This is called the single Lord North is the prime minister. 1765 is the single-handed reason why the American Revolution happened, and it is considered a major blunder, be it political or be it economic, by the British in their greed to get more. For anybody who has joined till this point, because I can see people still joining in, what we have done till this point is established that the British want more. We've established that there were three major causes which were adding to attitudinal change. We've established that the 7 Years' War has happened. We've established that the British want more because they had invested quite a lot. And now they have done two things before 1765. They tried to control smuggling. They tried to amend the Molasses Act, but that is still not enough. And the greed of the British is going to change everything, because in 1765 they will produce the fourth cause and the most important cause, which is called the Stamp Act. Now, what do you mean by the Stamp Act? Stamp Act introduced in the American colonies a stamp duty on any legal paper or paper related to civil or what we call as administrative matter, even church documents needed this stamp on them. Just to show it to you, see, this is the stamp we are talking about. This is called the stamps which you need on any form of legal document. And this is a major game changer. This is a major game changer because basically it's like what we have today as stamp paper. See, any document which is going to be a legal deed, a commercial document, administrative document, civil document, church document. Now you have to actually give a certain amount of money so that the British officer is going to stamp it. Now, if you look at the nature of this act, there are two major blunders which the British has done. The first blunder is, does it impact everyone? Does it impact everyone? Yes, it does. It, for the first time, taxes everyone. And more than that, the tax was universal, going over and above merchant based taxes. And the Stamp Act, imagine today the government of India says that every A4 paper which you use, you have to give 1 rupee tax on every A4 paper which you use anywhere. This type of act impacts everyone. And in a way, this is the direct exploitation of the Americans. See, Shelly, doesn't matter if the tax is high or low. Till 1765, if there is 100% population, 80% population did not pay any tax. However, this is something which impacts the day to day. And this move would not have happened if the British attitude had not changed. The Stamp Act is considered a very important cause because the British somehow crossed a line here. and the response will show you that also. It's not that the tax is very high. It's just that if I am a farmer, I didn't care if the British are introducing Navigation Acts or the Molasses Act. Now I care if this will impact me or not. How does a stamp act affect everyone? Pratik, in your life, sometime, someday, and some for sure, you will buy a stamp paper, be it a rent agreement, be it a house agreement, be it any car agreement, anything, insurance, anything. When you talk about legal papers, people need it, and day-to-day working of the life of the people will get impacted by a stamp act, because everybody is going to use it. Land deeds were happening randomly on any paper. Now you need a stamp paper. Stamp paper today, in if you've ever gone through any form of even examination, in certain examinations you need to fill in an affidavit. You'd have gone to your college. When you would have gone to your college, in college the first thing which happens is the college will say, get me an anti-ragging affidavit. You fill it up. That anti-ragging affidavit happens on a stamp paper. That stamp paper is only 100 rupees. You don't feel it because we have been born into this system. Imagine, as I said, every paper which you produce, the paper which you're writing also on, there is a tax for every sheet which you use. That is a very big tax. And try to understand this point, that there is a point at which you have never seen any tax, and now you have a tax. So that will change your perspective also, and that will be a very major change for you. So introduced in the American colonies as stamp duty on any legal paper related to civil or administrative matter. Even church documents needed this, and churches always produce what are called almanacs. These are small diaries which they produce. They also need to now pay taxes. The church is also paying tax in a way. So this is a major blunder. Why do I call it a blunder? Because it is the Stamp Act which is going to produce a lot of response. Can I talk about the response and everybody is with me till this point? No issues. Sir, those days many people not educated, they were not aware of stamp. How will they rebel against the British? Well, Shivaji, everybody understands money. You don't need to be educated to understand money. So education and understanding of money are two very different things. Not every shopkeeper is a BA honors or a BTech. So understand this point. When monetary impact comes through, you don't need to be educated to understand the impact. Okay. Till this point, everybody is with me. Please, some of you said yes. I want everybody's assertion, because now we will go into a cycle. Now this is basically called a cycle of escalation, de-escalation, escalation, de-escalation, escalation, de-escalation. And it will reach to a point that they will never de-escalate. Okay. Now, we have discussed 4 causes, all adding up to the Stamp Act: the Enlightenment, the 7 Years' War, and the change in British attitude. All manifest itself in the form of a very, very dangerous act introduced by the British, which is called the Stamp Act. Now, as soon as the Stamp Act comes, now please pay attention, I'll write it down for you also. As soon as the Stamp Act comes, the Americans lose their mind. See, first things first, that the Americans now don't look at this relationship of benevolence, which is that, see, if I'm the first generation merchant, the British gave me an economic standing. So I will always be grateful to the British. This may go into the second generation, this may go into the third generation. But after a certain point, we start to take things for granted. So the later generations of the Americans didn't take the British integration of British America into the British Empire as a favor. Rather, they started to question it, as it is the Enlightenment was making them question this relationship. Now, the point was that the generation which is existing in 1765 doesn't really care about what happened in 1600 or 1492 or 1500. Same thing happens with us. We take our freedoms for granted because we didn't fight for that. So a person in 1947 and a person in 1950 and a person in 1960 would know the pain of independence, but we don't take it for granted because we're born into this fundamental rights regime, and therefore we take it for granted. And thereafter we talk about a lot of things which we would not have talked about maybe in 17 or in 1948, 49, 50, because we understood the pain of it. This is called basically generational gap which comes through. Now, when we talk about America, now they don't care did the British actually in a way integrated. They were seeing that exploitation, but they were okay with it. Now, as soon as the Stamp Act comes, the Americans come up with this concept that how can you introduce this tax on me? Now, the Enlightenment is speaking through them. They say that we as British Americans, or rather Americans, now you see how their language is changing. We as Americans are not represented in the what we call as House of Lords or the House of Commons in the British Parliament. So if you do not represent us, how can you tax us? See, I'll give you the logic behind this. So today, I pay income tax. I pay GST. You pay GST. You could be paying income tax. But the concept is that why do I pay income tax? Because I am represented via my MP or MLA in the state legislative assembly and the parliament. Basically, the MP from my constituency was elected by me. He doesn't really care. He doesn't really embody my understanding. But theoretically, he represents me in the parliament. So because it is a representative democracy, I am represented in the parliament through my representative. The government has the right to tax me because I am a very important part of this whole we the people nation concept. However, the Americans now talk about this type of relationship in a colonial context, wherein they are saying, no, they come up with a very important slogan: no taxation without representation. Their understanding is that because Americans are not represented in the British Parliament, the right to tax does not apply. Now, why do I say that this act is a blunder? Because this question was never raised previously. Because merchants were the ones who were getting taxed, so nobody really cared. So today, if I say that there is a increase of 100% custom duty on all imports in India, it may or may not impact you directly. But if I say that every UPSC aspirant and every student in India has to pay a tax of 1,000 rupees per month for the governmental help which they get, it will impact crores of people in India. And therefore, your attitude to both of them will be different. So the point was, previously, nobody really cared about the merchants. But this tax will be a blunder, because what it will do is, it will do two things. It will politically unite the Americans, because there will be a new body, a new organization which will come up. Think of it like the INC of America. They're called the Sons of Liberty. Ironical name, but Sons of Liberty. and there will also be a crystallization of American identity. What do I mean by this point? The point is that now they see American and Britisher as two distinct identities. Though they are Britishers, though they are Europeans sitting in America, now they see American as a different identity itself, and now it becomes American versus Britisher. And if you understand one point, will there all in a relationship of colonialism, which is the concept of mother country and colony, is it a relationship of equality? Is it a relationship of equality? No. The basic point is that colonialism is based on hierarchy. It is based on domination. It is based on subjugation. It is based on subordination. But you see how when it comes to white, when you try to put in this concept of white domination over white people, this is their privilege speaking. That no, how can you tax us? In a colonial relationship also, they want equality, which is that no taxation without representation. First represent us in the parliament, and if you are not going to represent us, no one is going to pay the tax. So I hope that you are understanding the gravity of this act or the importance of this act in the larger story of your American Revolution, because this is going to change everything. So the Stamp Act will create multiple questions which will in turn unite them also, and will also create a othering, which is American Britisher. If this point is clear, I want to discuss now the chain of events which will start after the Stamp Act. Do we understand that in this list which I created here, I can now act or add the fourth point, which is the Stamp Act crystallized the identity of the Americans, politically united them, and also the Americans for the first time questioned the basis or fundamental fact of subjugation and colonialism. That they basically questioned the relationship itself. Sons of Liberty is the name of the organization. So when I have written these 4 points, do they make sense to you? If they do, then I want to discuss the larger story. Yes? Are you finding this interesting? Are you finding this something intriguing? Because if you look at our own nationalism, if you look at our own story of independence, it was not like this. We were never going to say that represent us in the British Parliament. This is a totally different concept itself. You see how when it comes to white on white colonialism, the notions are different in that regard. So can I move to the next set of issues? Because now there will be a very interesting series of things which will happen. Okay, great. Till this point, nobody has no issues. Okay. So we started by 1763, 7 Years' War. 1765, the Stamp Act. Now tell me one thing. Would the British actually give the Americans any form of representation? The British are the British. The Stamp Act created the context for no taxation without representation. And very simply, the British denied this demand. And as soon as they denied this demand, there were protests, boycott of British goods, and widespread discontent across the colonies. And the protest was so much and so big that the British withdrew the act in 1766 because of backlash. So we have never seen in Indian history the British taking back something. But because of the boycott, because of the protest, the British had to take this act back. But the point was that the damage was already done. And this is why we see or call the Stamp Act as the single most important changeover point in this relationship. Now, in 1766, once they repeal the Stamp Act is repealed, but they will introduce an act in place of it, and it will be called the Townshend Duties. Townshend is the person who introduced it. That is why it's called Townshend. Townshend Duties had two major provisions. Goes back to regulating trade, and in order to check smuggling, British army regiments are stationed in America. But why am I discussing the Townshend Duties? I'm discussing the Townshend Duties because the Townshend Duty is in a way a de-escalation. So if you look at this relationship till this point, there have been escalation, de-escalation. Escalation was Stamp Act. De-escalation was Townshend Duties. So the British were considerate enough to not keep the Stamp Act. However, this Townshend Duties is going to create the context in which this relationship is going to become even more bitter. And how does it become bitter? I'll tell you. Everybody's following me till this point? Yes? No issues? Because now we will go into three acts, one after the other. Yes, sir. No issues. Okay. Now, what happens is that the regiment is placed in what we call today as Boston. So we started with the Stamp Act. The Stamp Act created the context in which political unity came in these American colonies. The damage was already done. Sons of Liberty still existed. The relationship has now become bitter. Now Townshend Duties were introduced, and the Townshend Duties went back to now trying to regulate trade, and the British tried to undo what they had done. However, it was already too late. Now, under the rules of the Townshend Duties, there were regiments of the British officers or British soldiers which were going to be placed in different parts of America so as to check smuggling. Now, in Boston, which is a city and is going to be a major epicenter for most of the issues, in Boston, what happens is that it was the winter season, snowed quite a lot, and the American youth at this point of time had developed a certain bitter, what we call as relationship with the Britishers. So what will happen is, and it's named very ironically, but what will happen is that in Boston, 5, 6, 7 very young, you can call teenagers, are going to now tease the Britishers in a way that they will make snowballs and they will start to throw them on the British officers, on the British soldiers, and tell them to go back, Britisher, that they will try to tease the British regiments. Now, the crowd was not bigger than 10 people, and the soldiers got irritated so much by this act of these teenagers that they will one second, I have a yes, they will shoot on the teenagers and 5 people will die. 5 people will die. And in American history, this is called the Boston Massacre. This is called the Boston Massacre. 5 people is not a massacre. More people die in India in a car crash. So, massacre, Jallianwala Bagh was a massacre. This is not a massacre. But in American history, 5 people's death, this is very, very dramatically painted in this way. It did not really happen like this also. It was just a random event which happened in the sidelines of the Boston Harbor, but painted like this that a lot of people died. Out of it, I can only count 3 people who are actually dead also here. But the point is that the Boston Massacre was seen as a major turning point, because with the bloody massacre or the Boston Massacre, what happened was now violence was introduced in the relationship. In the relationship. So, multiple Indians died in Simon Commission in 1857, in the protests against multiple acts, Rowlatt Satyagrah, Jallianwala Bagh, what we call as the non-cooperation movement, the CDM, the Quit India movement. None of them are called massacres. But snowball throwing on 5, 6 random soldiers, the British responded in this way. And why is the Boston Massacre important? Because of the Boston Massacre, the British have to now withdraw the Townshend duties in a way, and the regiments are removed from British America. So now I want to basically tell you that there's a pattern which is emerging. The pattern is that you had the Stamp Act. That was an escalation point. Then we had the Townshend duties. Now you have the 6th, rather not 6th, this 5th, right? 5th reason for the American Revolution, which is called the Boston Massacre. And the Boston Massacre is important because violence became a part of this relationship. So in this slide in which we have written down the causes, there 4 causes were written. The fifth would be the Boston Massacre. So I am putting it asterisk here, asterisk, and the story is picked up from here. I want a slide here. So the 5th cause was the Boston Massacre, which made this relationship based on violence and bitterness increased. Townshend duties, two to three regiments are placed across what we call as the American colonies. The Townshend duties goes back to regulating trade. However, the skirmish, rather it's a skirmish rather than a massacre, the clash between the youth and the regiments in turn leads to the Boston Massacre, which in turn makes this relationship even more British, what we call as bitter. Are we clear with regards to the story till this point? Are we clear with regards to till this point? Anybody having any issue? I'll tell you, Shreyank, because the aggressiveness of the British in America is lower because white versus white is always like this. Rather, when it is white versus brown, which is us Indians, their attitude is totally different. And as it is, the British American colonies were not very lucrative. India is a totally different case altogether, which I will discuss with you. Can I now take the story forward? Because India is now going to come into the picture. Somehow, into all of this, India will become very, very important in this relationship. Once more, fifth Boston Massacre makes this relationship based on violence, bitterness. You don't have to go through the story of how it happened, but it's a 5 people dead in a clash between the British and the Americans. I want everybody's assertion, yes or no, because then we can talk about India, because India is connected to this story somehow. Come on. Can we say because American people were white, British introduced? No, it's not because they were white. You can already see that their attitude is very different. In India, did they actually repeal the Rowlatt Act? Even when the Jallianwala Bagh massacre happened, it took them 4 to 5, remember, 4 to 5 years to even dilute the Rowlatt Act. A very good example of this would be Swadeshi movement. For example, Swadeshi movement happened because of the partition of Bengal. Partition of Bengal, 1905. The annulment of partition of Bengal happened in 1911, 6 years later. And here you see, one after the other, they are just repealing next year. So there is a totally attitudinal difference. They had a racist mindset. Yes, the whites, all whites are racist. What is that should not come as a surprise to you. 5 people who died were Americans. Obviously, it's an American massacre. I'm coming to Boston Tea Party. Wait, you are jumping the gun. Why 5 people died massacre? What is the reason behind? They were shot. They were killed. Police firing. Okay, now when we come to, we've gone through one merry-go-round, which is Stamp Act, Townshend duties, and Boston Massacre. Now the very simple de-escalation point was repealment of Townshend. So this is one cycle. Now we go into the next cycle, which is going to be linked to what we call as the Tea Act. Now, in order to understand the Tea Act, you need to understand something other than America. Now, I'm going to use a certain terminology. Firstly, tell me how many of you have done modern India? How many of you have done modern India? Yes, I have done. Very good. Done. Done. Very good. I have not done. No issues. That is better. If you've not done modern India, that's better. Okay. Now, the people who are writing done, I am going to say a term. Townshend duties is de-escalation point. The repealment of de-escalation from Stamp Act. De-escalation from Stamp Act. Now, the terminology I'm going to use, you need to tell me if you know it or not. When I say Clivian, which is Robert Clive, Clivian fiscal bubble. Does this make sense to you? Robert Clive's financial bubble, fiscal bubble, does it make sense to you? Now the yes no becomes different. Kinda, Bengal, no sir. There, he was a thief, sure. No, little bit, no sir, no sir. So now, see, you know it, but you don't know the terminology of it. So I have to therefore explain it to you. Now please try to understand. Robert Clive was a thief, that is okay. He was a thug, he was a bastard, whatever you want to call him, that is okay. Not had nothing to do with dual role, has nothing to do with that. Okay. It's called, yes, Bengal bubble is the more lamish term which is used. It's called the fiscal bubble, but rather it's robber state. Okay. Robert Clive, okay. Stop. I get it. You know it, but you don't know it. So let's rather do it from scratch. Right. Now, see, I will presume things, but I'll try to explain it to you. See, if you know, you would know that the East India Company is a joint stock company. When you do Modern India with me, I'll explain it to you in much more detail. But East India Company is not a royal company, it's a joint stock company. Joint stock company means that East India Company was listed in the London Stock Exchange as a company for which you could buy stock. How you have Tata Motors, this and that. The same way, it's a private company, which is a joint stock company listed in the London Stock Exchange. Now, an investor invests in the East India Company for something called the dividend. Or return or dividend. Now, in 1765, the British got the Diwani of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa. After the Battle of Buxar in 1764, through the Treaty of Allahabad in 1765, the British gained the Diwani of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa. Now, Robert Clive was the one who was basically claimed as the governor of Bengal at this point of time. But as you know, at this point of time, Clive did not want to take the administrative responsibilities, but only the fiscal responsibilities. That is the dual rule concept, which you know. You have Reza Khan, who was basically managing the what we call as the role of the general administration. On the other hand, I don't want to introduce terms for you. And then you have the Diwan or Diwani rights, which Robert Clive managed. Nizamat and Diwani. Sure. Perfect. So Nazim's position and the position of the Diwan. Now, when Clive got to know about Bengal's revenue, let's presume that the East India Company stock was 10 pounds for one stock. 10 pounds for one stock. This is on the eve of getting the Diwani. Now what Clive does is that Clive starts to now beat the drum like anything across London, across India, saying that a lot of revenue is going to come from the Bengal, Bihar, Orissa Diwani. Crores of dams, crores of rupees we will take out. Close to 5 million to 10 million pounds was expected out of Bengal. But as you know that Clive did not play with the revenue settlement or the revenue administration at the grassroots level. He just appointed a European supervisor who was basically asked to overexploit. And see, what happens is that between 1765 and 1770-ish period, and rather this period in which we are operating, what happens is that the East India Company stock starts to rise very quickly. Because as Robert Clive starts to say, we will get a lot of revenue, we will get a lot of revenue, the revenue of the East India Company becomes the dividend for the stockholder. So you can get a better dividend because the revenue of the East India Company went high or went very, very high. But we already know by that not even by 1770, by 1769, because of the way East India Company was operating in India, there will be multiple famines which will happen in 1769, 1770. And the problem which Clive was facing in a way, extracting revenue was non-consistency. For example, sometime he would get 5 million, sometime he would get 1 million, sometime he would not even get 1 million pounds. There was too much fluctuation. Now, this increase in stock price is artificial. And this is called the Clivian fiscal bubble, wherein because of him saying a lot of revenue is going to come, a lot of revenue is going to come, he hyped up the market so much that the East India Company was valued at something which it was really should not have been. Now what will happen is, first round of dividend will be given. And as soon as the first round of dividend is given, the dividend was less than the stock price. And therein, the people will realize that Clive had actually created a fiscal bubble and the real payout was extremely low. And when people will realize it, they will sell stock. When there is too much supply of something and the demand is very low, what happens to the price of that commodity? Yes, the price crashes or the price falls. And wherein what will happen is East India Company stock will crash. And it will come to £1 at one point of time because of Clive. You know the story, but you don't know the terminology behind it. This is called the East India Company fiscal crisis or the Clivian fiscal crisis or fiscal bubble, which bursts. And because of bursting of the Clivian fiscal bubble, now East India Company is in a literal fiscal crisis because their stock is undervalued and their credibility has gone down, and now the East India Company needs to be revived. Do we understand this story, and do we understand now Clivian fiscal bubble? When I will teach you modern India, we'll try to understand it in much more bigger context, and we will try to understand how then Hastings was sent with this concept that try to get consistency. He will not be able to do it through the farming out system. Then Lord Cornwallis will be said, which said permanent settlement, that we permanently get same thing. So the concept of land revenue in India was based on the Clivian fiscal bubble itself. How it crashed, Tulsi, that happens. If your stock price is at a very high price and everybody sells the stock at same point of time, the stock price will fall. And therefore, if your company does not have money and you have to pay out people at thousands of pounds, it will lead to crisis itself. So very simply, the context for the Tea Act is very, very important. The context is what we call as the Clivian fiscal bubble, wherein the East India Company was overvalued because of Clive's argument that we will get a lot of revenue, which would in turn translate to dividend. But because dividend did not come, people sold the stock. And when they sold the stock, there was a crash in the East India Company stock. And now East India Company is in a crisis. Can I now link it up with America and Tea Act? Do we understand the context well? Okay. Now we know that the East India Company is in a crisis. And now that it is in a crisis, it is very, very clear that Lord North and George III had to do something. had to do something, they need to intervene. And in order to revive the East India Company, the solution which they give is that they introduced Tea Act in America. And the Tea Act in America is very straightforward. East India Company can sell or buy, but specifically sell, its tea without paying any duty or any import or export tax. This is basically giving monopoly to East India Company in America. Now, if I'm an American seller, if I'm a smuggler, can I now compete with the East India Company? Can I now compete with the East India Company? No. So, American sellers, importers, and exporters now start to protest. So, you see how something which happened in India got linked up with what happened in America and therefore created the context in which the Tea Act was introduced. Now the Americans literally lose it. The protest will become very, very intensified, and the Tea Act will pave way for a very, very famous event which is remembered by everyone, which is called the Boston Tea Party. See, in every harbor, when the East India Company ship came, the Americans did not allow the ship to get docked itself. They said, we will not allow East India Company to unload the tea in America. However, the governor of Boston, his name was Hutchinson. Hutchinson was a little bit too adamant. He said, no, I will not let the East India Company ship go back. He allowed the East India Company ship to get docked in the Boston harbor. And once the Boston harbor, the ship is docked, the Sons of Liberty, the members of it, as led by a person called Samuel Adams, they will dress up as East India Company officers and board the ship in the night, and very famously, very famously, they will throw all the tea from the ship into the Boston harbor. And this is called the Boston Tea Party, wherein close to 10,000 pounds worth of, close to 4 million pounds today, 10,000 pounds worth of what we call as tea was thrown into the harbor of Boston. And because when you put tea into water, it gives a brownish tinge. For days, the Boston harbor used to look like a brown water or like a teacup. That is why it's called the Boston Tea Party. And the Boston Tea Party was basically the turning point of the attitude of the British towards the Americans. Because till this point, every time the British was ready to move back. But now the British said, enough is enough. We will not let you dictate everything. And the attitudinal change in the British also came from the fact that now the British had India. And with India under their control, they did not need to take this, what we call as crybaby attitude of the Americans. And now, whilst after the Stamp Act, we had the Townshend duties, After the Boston Massacre, we had the repealment of the Townshend duties. The Tea Act will in turn lead to the Boston Tea Party. And after the Boston Tea Party, there will be no de-escalation, because now the Britishers will make the Americans pay. And those acts are called the coercive acts or the intolerable acts. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this whole story together through the PPT so that we are all at the same point of time. So just to repeat what we've done, the simple straightforward point is, post 7 years war, there was a bigger debt which the Britishers had. So they first amend the Molasses Act of 1733, and they tried to introduce an amendment through which 6 pence duty on gallon bought from the French and the British, or the French and the Spanish. Then comes the blunder, which is called the Stamp Act, duty on newspaper, books, court documents, commercial documents, land deeds, and almanacs. This in turn will create the context for the first time, the parliament attempted to raise money from direct taxes in the colonies rather than regulation of trade. Stamp Act impacted every strata of society. Popular outpour of discontent. The concept of communities' right not to be taxed except by its elected representatives. No taxation without representation is going to become the outcry. Consequence is going to be Stamp Act Congress is going to be formed. 27 delegates from the 9 colonies are going to meet in New York. They will boycott British goods. Sense of American identity and unity will start to develop. Marches, processions, organizations will happen. And now their most important slogan is going to become liberty, property, no stamps. Now, in response to this, they were also not very happy with the way the whole colonial administration was there, because the governor or the captain was appointed by the Britisher. He used to have a council under him, which was elected by the people. But the executive was not responsible to the what we call as legislature, and that is why people used to believe that this was also a defective system. Now, in order to de-escalate from Stamp Act, Townshend duties introduced, wherein indirect taxation through regulation of trade, tax imposed on imported goods, new boards of custom commissioners, and suppress smuggling. Suppression of smuggling will lead to 2 regiments of British soldiers in Boston, popular hostility, skirmish between soldiers and locals, 5 people will be killed. British had to withdraw its soldiers itself. Now comes the context for the Tea Act. The tea consumed by all sections of society. East India Company fiscal crisis leads to crash in stock price. East India Company allowed ship and tea, what we call as to ship and sell tea at unrealistic prices, exempted from all duties itself. Smuggling American merchants could not compete with this price, and the consequence of this is ship were not allowed to unload, but Hutchinson allowed it to unload in Boston. Sons of Liberty will throw all the tea in the harbor, and that is very famously known as the Boston Tea Party. Now, let me do something. Let me consolidate till this point, and then we'll go to the last sector, or the last 15-20 minutes discussion. Are we following it? I read it. I read this PPT because you already know all the points. It's just to reinforce what we've done. Yes, this is the way we operate when you already know the story. Okay, now let me consolidate what we've done till this point. Governor Hutchinson was a Britisher, yes. So the flow chart for rather we'll say the flow of conflict. If you remember, I had written 5 points here. I'll add the 6th point also. So, 6th point, 6th cause, Boston Tea Party after Tea Act. The British were now not going to de-escalate. Not going to de-escalate. Escalate. See, all of this, I'll tell you what is the American Revolution. Don't worry. See, the American Revolution is basically when in 1774 there will be something called the Continental Congress which will be formed. This Continental Congress by 1776 will declare independence, which is called the Declaration of Independence. And from 1776 to 1783, they will fight a war, which is called the War of Independence. America got independence in 1783 properly. But from 1776 itself, they declared their independence. We don't care about this 1776 to 83 period. We don't even care about what happened between 1774 to 1776. We care what led to the development of this feeling and the Continental Congress being formed. I'm telling you the future, but I'm telling you that to understand, when they ask you the causes of the American Revolution, they are basically asking you what led to the development of the Continental Congress in 1774. That is the question they're basically asking. But in order to answer that, I don't care how the Continental Congress operated. You don't even need to know as a GS student what happened as the war happened. You just need to know what led to the formation of the Continental Congress. Are you getting my point? I'm trying to telling you, I'm telling you the future so that you understand the relevance of these points. The sixth point is that the Boston Tea Party is going to change the dynamics because now the British will not de-escalate. And this is the point you need to understand and have to understand. So that is why I'm giving you this type of what we call as a concept of flow. See, the concept is that you have the first escalation point, which is Stamp Act. Now I'm consolidating. Please pay attention. Please pay attention. Stamp Act was the first point of escalation. What did the Stamp Act do? Political unity, Sons of Liberty, protests, damage done. Now, the de-escalation of this was Townshend Duty. Repeal Stamp Act. However, this led to the next point, which is Boston Massacre, wherein relationship became bitter and violent. Then comes removal of the British regiments. However, this will lead to the next, which is the Tea Act. Now, Tea Act was followed by Boston Tea Party. Tea Act, East India Company in crisis. Boston Harbor, tea throne. Now, if we look at the pattern, there should be de-escalation now. Yes or no? If we look at the pattern, there should be de-escalation. Yes or no? Yes. This is the way it has always operated, which is de-escalation, escalation, de-escalation, escalation, escalation, de-escalation. You can see there is always an up point, so there is always a lower point. But this time it will not happen. What will happen this time is called the intolerable acts or coercive acts And this will in turn lead to the formation of First Continental Congress in 1774. So if you understand the basic point now, can I tell you the Intolerable Act? Can I tell you First Continental, Second Continental, and end American Revolution? Yes? Okay. Now, once we finish American Revolution, we will take a break. Now, listen to the story, and then we can finish the concept itself. So, the Boston Tea Party has happened. Now the British don't want to de-escalate. They're in a way, they believe that the Americans have crossed a line, and the British attitude had also become very, very aggressive since the fact that they now had India. So they did not really care about America too much already. So now, in that heat of the moment, the British will introduce what are called the Intolerable Acts. Intolerable Acts, wherein there will be three provisions which will be intolerable to the Americans. First provision was Boston Harbor will be closed, and until and unless the Boston city people give money for value of what tea was thrown, basically the amount of tea which was thrown, you give compensation to the East India Company in monetary value in money. Until and unless East India Company is not compensated for that money, the Boston Harbor will not be opened for trade. So this will impact the economy, this will impact the Boston people, and 10,000 pounds at that time was a very big amount. Second, it said that how we had a dual system in which governor was British appointed, and the council was appointed by the people. It will remove the council, and now the governor will become the sole administrative body in these colonies. But the last provision of this act was problematic, wherein it said that now the British will place and appoint and send multiple regiments to the Americas, and the people have to now give military lodging in their own houses. This means that if your army is going through a town, they're going through this town, the people of this town will have to basically take the military people into their houses and give them food and shelter. This is something which will impact everyone, because a very big regiment means every house would have to take 2 to 3 soldiers. And this was seen as too intolerable for the Americans to actually digest. To add to insult to injury, a new act was introduced in Canada, which is called the Quebec Act. Why did they deny? They can't deny as of right now, because it is coming from the British, and that denial will be the response to it only. The Quebec Act, which was introduced in Canada with the British, was the real alarm bell for the Americans. Quebec is an area in Canada, and what happens is that the British introduced a small provision wherein for the first time, the Catholic Church was given the right to send missionaries to Canada and convert people. And this was seen as the Americans as a major dangerous provision, because most of the Americans were Protestants. And they thought that our religious freedom is now under jeopardy. And based on the Intolerable Acts, the 3 provisions, and the Quebec Act, Intolerable Act, the 3 provisions, I'll read it out to you so that you remember them better. The first one was Boston Harbor will close for trade until unless the tea is paid for close to 10,000 pounds worth of. Then they amended the Massachusetts Charter, under which now the council was not appointed by the people but by the governor, or that council was removed itself. And lodging, military lodging will be given in private homes. This was going to impact everyone. But the real problem was the Quebec Act, which was happening north of these colonies, wherein the British, who controlled Canada, allowed the church to have a legal position, and legal toleration of conversion was allowed by the British, and this was seen as a major turning point. The British response to the Quebec, to the Boston Tea Party, was extremely dangerous. And because it was based on these multiple acts, now the people were not able to accept anything in the form of a concession. And this in turn will lead to all these colonies coming together, meeting at Philadelphia. And that meeting is called the First Continental Congress. Don't go by the name, they are only not even 1% of that continent, but call themselves the Continental Congress. So, First Continental Congress, they will meet it, and they will now argue that we will boycott, we do not accept any of the two acts, we do not accept any of these acts, and now we will struggle for our independence. But at this point of time, there are two factions which exist in the Continental Congress: moderates and radicals. Moderates argue that okay, maybe we are overreacting, it's okay. Let the moderate concept was let us have still a relationship with the British, how our moderates used to act. But the radicals or the extremists, who were sons of liberty, argued we want no relationship with the British, we want independence. Now, at the First Continental Congress, at a place called Suffolk, they will come to resolve. Let's see how this relationship goes forward. But what will happen is, after First Continental Congress, multiple clashes will start to happen with the British. And now the American people will realize that this is going out of hand, because now war was becoming more and more imminent. So from the First Continental Congress, what will happen is there will be multiple clashes, and now they will meet for the second time. They will meet in 1776 again, and it is called the Second Continental Congress. But the Second Continental Congress is very, very significant, because it is here that they are going to establish what is called the Continental Army. Again, don't go by the name. The Continental Army will be given under the commander. His name was George Washington. George Washington is going to be the first commander of the Continental Army, and also the first president of America. The point is, he will now fight the British. And two other very interesting personalities, but one very, very important, Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, will now start to work on writing a declaration, and that is called the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence is going to be then adopted by all the colonies in July of 1776. They will believe and they will argue that we are independent, and from 1776 to 1783 they will fight what is called the War of Independence. And finally, they will get independence in 1783 when they will write their first constitution, and America is going to become the first republic in the world. This is basically, I'm telling you the significance why we study American Revolution. This is basically the story. American War of Independence is out of the syllabus. American War of Independence, I really don't care. Yes, Americans died, Britishers died, good, both of them died. Good. I really don't care about the dynamics of that war. Doesn't even really matter at the day honors level. But the simple straightforward point is the build up to the First Continental Congress is important, and that is what are the causes of the American Revolution. I'll read this part out of the PPT. Then I want to do one thing, which is two things. I want to write all the causes one place, and I want to write the significance one place. But if you realize something, it is only 10 years of war, close to 10 years of war, and they will get independence. India had to struggle for 200 years to get independence. The British always had a conciliatory attitude towards the Americans, and that will also emerge when it comes to the American Revolution, its significance and its cause. Can I read the rest of the part which I told you? Write the cause, write the significance, and we end American Revolution. Yes, Thomas Jefferson, he's not a political thinker, he was a nationalist when it comes to this. Okay, let's read this part out. So, this is where we stop. From where did we get idea of constitution? That is coming from the Enlightenment, and Thomas Jefferson is seen as to be a pioneer in writing constitution at this point of time. So, the revolution has now started. British legitimacy over the colonies was diminishing. Virginia House of Burgesses is going to pass a resolution that on 5th September 1774, 56 members will meet at Philadelphia, and this is called the First Continental Congress. The radicals argued that the Sons of Liberty argued that we need to get proper change in America, everything needs to change. While the moderates were ready to have a compromise, and they did not want a social revolution. They will meet at Suffolk to resolve everything. But the skirmishes and the battles and the clashes with the British will increase in the background. Now the program which will be decided at the First Continental Congress is to form a continental association. It will do boycott of British goods. It will have a committee which will basically stop any form of trade with the British. They will check if all traders are doing that also. They will also have a declaration of rights and grievances, that these are the grievances, but the British will ignore it. There were multiple things which were being considered. First, whether the parliament actually has any authority over the colony itself. And if yes, if no, then what should be the relationship of America with Britain? Now, at the Second Continental Congress, the Continental Congress is American, not British. At the Second Continental Congress, now Thomas Jefferson and Franklin will enter the Congress itself. Now they will ask the New England militia to change its name to become Continental Army under George Washington. Governor will be replaced by the people. Thereafter, the Loyalist and the Patriot faction were still questioning complete independence or not. Increased tensions and clashes will be there. And now there will be a pamphlet which will be introduced, which is called Common Sense. And the Common Sense pamphlet will argue that what do we get out of being with the British? We get nothing. So rather, we should become independent. And in the autumn of 1775, 5 colonies were still not very keen to become independent. But by 1776, Continental Congress was now asking everybody to be ready to govern themselves. In July, Thomas Jefferson is going to write the formal declaration of independence. On 4th of July, which is considered their Independence Day, they will adopt this policy, or they will adopt this act or this document, which is called Declaration of Independence. Between 1776 and 83, then they will fight. But from 1776, we believe that America was independent. Now, can I write the causes and the significance in 2 slides, and we end this concept? We've put in close to 5 hours for this, but it's the first topic, and your engine, your machinery here is coming to the level which you need to be in that. Because I'm still a little slow right now. I'll pick it up because you're going to become more and more comfortable with this. You want to call it CDM, you want to call it Quit India, whatever you want to call it. See, Anjali, Congress is an English word which means people coming together. It has nothing to do with the IRC, it has nothing to do with the Congress or the Congress. Congress is Congress. It's a word. It's like calling the sun sun. That's the basic part. Americans less exploited, less effort, less number. Yes, because Britishers still had a different agenda. I will give you a break, Badhur. Wait. First, let me consolidate this section. Causes of American Revolution. If now, first before I go there, did this story make sense to you? Because what I'm giving you in these two slides is what will be asked in the examination. You can write any answer from these two slides, but does it actually make sense why American Revolution is American Revolution? Because Commonwealth idea Mona Lisa will come later, not right now. Okay. Now, the British Empire was expanding at this point of time, but not at the level it was when it will be under when we will come under the British. Okay. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. This is what you need to write in the exam. First cause of the American Revolution, Enlightenment. Second cause of the American Revolution, 7 Years' War. Attitudinal change of Americans and Britishers. Stamp Act. Politically united. Boston Massacre. Violence and bitterness. Boston Tea Party. Americans cross the line for Britishers. Thereafter, intolerable acts. British try to punish and Americans form Continental Congress. 8. Continental Congress gave direction to the American struggle. See, Alina, I don't write stories because you don't have to remember the stories. If you will this recording is there for the next whatever till you have the subscription to us. You can always go through the stories. I want you to remember these points which you have to write in the examination. This is how you see. You have to write 150 words or 250 words. Can't give you katha kahani so that you basically fill up the unnecessary things in the examination rather than writing these crisp 8 points. But can I trust you to expand on each of this with 1 line or 2 lines? Can I trust you with that? Yes? Perfect. So if I can trust you with that, you can add here Quebec Act also. Sure. Easiest? Perfect. Now can I talk about significance? We can elaborate this. Good for quick revision. Yes. See, I'm giving you a snapshot. I've given you a snapshot. So for people who are, for example, going to college or going to work, they can just take a screenshot of this and they can just go through it. And when you don't remember, you can always listen to the story which I told you. So don't worry. As it is, writing stories is not possible within 150 to 250 words. Whatever I've said, I've taken 5 hours. You can write it in 250 words. That is not possible. Okay. Now, why Canada is not liberated? Because Canada was not part of these 13 colonies. Canada was under British administration. Okay. Now, let's talk about the significance. See, if you look at it, in the end, it is a very, very easy because you don't have to write. I have the task of explaining it to you. You don't have the task of explaining it to the examiner. You have the task of writing it in the exam. So your task is easier. Just state the things and leave it. You don't have to go through all the Enlightenment story, the 7 years war. No, no. When you write 7 years war, examiner knows what you mean, and you should also know what you're trying to say. That's it. Right? This is the 8 causes. Let's talk about the significance. Okay. Now, when we talk about significance, see, at face value, can we see last slide for a minute? You take a screenshot. If it is banned, you will get the annotated PPT, whatever it may be. I want to move forward. Enlightenment, 7 years war, attitudinal change, Stamp Act, Boston Massacre, Boston Tea Party, Intolerable Act, Continental Congress. Okay. Now, significance. See, if you look at it, it's a useless event. For you and me, for Indians, it has no real significance. But the problem is that UPSC tends to talk about French Revolution and American Revolution in very glorious light. And people tend to talk about these revolutions also very, very significant. So if I had to, I will write these 4 significances of this whole concept. And the first major significance of the American Revolution is America, or United States of America, will emerge as the first republic or truly democratic country. See, Britain was constitutional monarchy. Constitutional monarchy is a compromise between monarchy and democracy. But United States of America was the first example of a true democracy. It is the oldest democracy. Oldest democracy in the world. It existed since the 1776 itself. Thereafter, the second significance is it introduced into the world a new set of ideas and vocabulary, which is freedom, liberty, representation, democracy. So for the world, now America represented a new set of ideas and a new set of vocabularies. These new words became very, very important. Third is American Revolution, and this point I will explain to you, is a moment of economic nationalism. The Americans reacted to economic exploitation by coming together and decolonizing themselves. Decolonizing. And last but not the least is American Revolution triggered the French Revolution. Now, third and fourth point I will explain to you. See, liberty, freedom is this. Fraternity is French Revolution along with the Declaration of Rights, which we'll discuss. See, first point is United States of America is the oldest democracy. Obviously, first republic in the world. Thereafter, second point argues that for the world to now see, there was a democracy which existed, which talked about the concept of how there is now the concept of freedom, liberty, and the concept of how representation and democracy became the part of the world. There were multiple monarchies, but there was only one republic. So the American Revolution, in that sense, in a way, argued that there was a new idea which could exist. And this links up with the third point, which is that when we talk about nationalism, which is people coming together, it is a moment of economic nationalism. See, the whole syllabus of world history is nothing but different types of nationalisms. So this is called economic nationalism. For France is called political nationalism. Here, against political exploitation, people came together and decolonized themselves. So it is a true example of economic nationalism against what we call as mercantilism. Mercantilism is merchant-based exploitation. They fought against it and they won against it. And the biggest point is, why is the American Revolution important? Because guess who was paying for the war? The war of independence which the Americans were fighting, the French were actually paying for the weapons, paying for the arms and ammunitions, and the French in a way will bankrupt themselves, and that will become the reason for the French Revolution. And the Statue of Liberty, which you see today, is actually a gift from France to America. But the Americans are ehsan faramosh. They forgot what the French did for them, and therefore they did not even help the French in any way or form. But the French Revolution, immediate cause trigger is actually the American Revolution. So very straightforward point. The question which will come in the examination, I will show the old questions to you. Very simply is, what is the cause and significance of the American Revolution? If we are clear with regards to these points, and you will understand the significance of the American Revolution more when I'll teach you French Revolution, can we end this topic here, take a break and come back and start French Revolution? I'll give you a question. I'll give you a question so that you can understand what type of question can come. Spanish are not in this picture as it is. I'll give you a question. I'll give you a practice question. See, practice question. The American Revolution was not a moment. This has become too difficult. Wait once again. The causes of the American Revolution go beyond the intolerable acts. Comment. Can you write this answer? Basically, what do you have to take? This means French help independence, in turn had invited own economics. Yes, Ilma. You can write this question. You will get questions from me from time to time. You will get it on Saturday also. But this is the question which you have to go. This is basically a question of causes. You have to talk about what happened before it also. So let's do one thing. Let's take a break and we will come back and start the French Revolution. Now, what I will do is I will pick up the pace a little bit. Till this point, it was about oiling the machinery. अब ये गर्म हो गया, machine गर्म हो गई. So now I can actually teach you at the pace I want to teach you. I'll pick it up a little bit. I'll show you. It's not very quick, but now we need to see it from a different perspective. And I will tell you why this event is also important. This is the most comical event which ever happened in the world. Okay. Discuss all causes, extra focus on intolerable act. Yes, Abhishek. Perfect. Can I take a break? Please, I will. Ishan, I'll then asked comments to you first. I'm reading it again. There's no point going most of the Intolerable Act. It is rather the change in attitude, the Stamp Act, the Boston Massacre, which led to the Intolerable Acts. Okay. Your concentration towards the screen, because there are multiple things which we need to discuss first before we go to the concept of French Revolution. So can we do that? Everybody's ready? Do you need to make notes? No, Palak. Everything I'm writing down is notes itself. Yes, sir. Okay, just give me 1 second. I'm not going anywhere. Just 1 second. Right. Everybody ready? Answer writing, don't worry. I will give you an understanding when it will come to writing answers. First, let us cover 2-3 modules. Okay, ready, sir. Now, see, when we talk about French Revolution, there are 2 to 3 things which you again need to remember. There is cause, there is course, and there is significance of the French Revolution. Now, out of this, course is too long to be asked in 150, 250 words. And the questions again are made out of these 2 areas, which is cause and significance. Now, I always get this question later. So then why do you do the course with us? Because if I don't tell you the course, you will not understand the causes and you will not understand the significance. But the questions are coming out of this area, and all questions till this point from this sector have been from this area only. So first things first, the course is quite long. It's a very long story, but I will tell you that story in the most easiest way possible. But you don't again have to get caught up. Why am I telling you this? Because we have to do smart study here, and you don't have to get caught up into random small details which really don't matter. What matters is cause, which I will do with you in detail. I will do significance with you in detail. But course, I will tell you as a story. I will ask you to bring a pillow. You can just lie down and listen to the story and enjoy it. Because the French Revolution is nothing but a very big comedy show. And that I will prove to you and that I will show to you when I will discuss the course of it. So the first things first, the purpose of the discussion of French Revolution is cause and significance. First thing, clear. Is the purpose clear? Because if the purpose is clear, then we move to the next set. Yes, okay. Now, the French Revolution is argued to be a very major revolution, something which shook the world, something which is so path-breaking, this and that. But French Revolution is the biggest failure, is one of the biggest failure when it comes to any event, and did not achieve what it wanted to achieve from the get-go itself. Just to give you a snapshot, they will start in 1789 with a person called Louis XVI as their monarchy. They were not happy with that monarchy. They will write one constitution in 1791, which will make them a constitutional republic, which will make them a constitutional monarchy. Then they will write another constitution in 1793, which will make them a republic. Then they will write another constitution in 1795, which will make them a new type of republic, which is called directory rule. Then in 1799, Napoleon will capture power. And once Napoleon will capture power, he will proclaim himself as emperor in 1804. So they were again back to a dictator. And once Napoleon will be defeated in 1815, the European powers will install Louis XVIII back. So they will start at monarchy, become a constitutional monarchy, become a republic, then again emperor, and then come back to monarchy. So the French were very good in writing constitutions but not implementing them. The only thing which they knew was write a constitution, that's it. Thereafter, when it came to implementing it, they kept on making constitution. One constitution, second constitution, third constitution, fourth constitution. Four constitutions start with Louis the 16th and end up with Louis the 18th. It's called Bourbon Restoration. And ironically, the story doesn't stop here. They will again till 1848 be a monarchy. Then they will again become a republic. New constitution will be written here. Then they will become a monarchy again in 1852 when Napoleon Bonaparte's nephew is going to capture power. And later in 1870-71, they will finally become a republic. They will keep on writing constitutions. 6 constitutions they will write between 1789 and 1870. 100 years, they will write 6 constitutions. So understand this point, that the French Revolution was one of the most comical and the worst when it came to implementation of its policies itself. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 constitutions. And this tells you the importance of us or our Constituent Assembly of writing one constitution which we till today follow. But the French Revolution is significant because of 2 to 3 things. Because the ideas which were in French Revolution were very radical. They will give us a very important document which is called the Declaration of Right of Man and Citizen, which is the mother of all constitutions in the world. And generally, the French Revolution introduced a certain dynamism in Europe, which allowed for Germany and Italy to get unified. And political nationalism was proved out of this whole event itself. So, very simply, the French Revolution never achieved its targets. But in the process of doing this, they were actually able to introduce certain things which will be significant for Europe generally. So the word fraternity that way is not even fraternity. When I will show you the Declaration of Right of Man and Citizen, you will realize everything which is our constitution was picked up from there only. So can I now discuss the causes of the French Revolution whilst knowing that this is the merry-go-round which they are going to play later? Yes? So you now understand the purpose and you understand the basic story, how it is going to play out actually. Okay. Now, for the people who have not seen the old maps of Europe, see, this is France, this is Spain, this is Portugal, this is Great Britain. We are talking about France here right now. At this point of time, there is no Germany or Italy. Rather, there is something called the Holy Roman Empire. There's nothing holy about this empire and there's nothing Roman about this empire. But basically, because this emperor got the sanction of the Pope, it is called Holy Roman Empire. And then there is 2 big countries called Prussia and Austria. Not Russia. Russia is here. Prussia and Austria. So France had 3 major neighbors. 1, Holy Roman Empire, Prussia and Austria. Just remember this geography. But when it comes to mapping, we will discuss the maps of Europe in much more detail when we go forward. So, the discussion which I start with you right now are the causes of the French Revolution. Poland plus Russia. No. Poland plus Russia equals to Prussia. No. It's not that. Prussia is nothing but now Germany. Area is obviously overlapping. This is not the final map of Europe. The map of Europe will change 7 times. Okay. And there's a word, or there's a saying that never give a European the task of making maps. They messed up India, Pakistan, they messed up India, Bangladesh, they messed up most of our borders. They were not very good in making their own borders. So it's an old issue which they have. Very bad at cartography. Very, very bad at cartography, which is the science of making maps. Very bad. Very bad. Never, never, ever give a European a map making exercise. They will never be able to figure it out. Okay. Now, as it is, they're good for nothing. Causes for the French Revolution. Causes of French Revolution. What are they good at? Exploiting. That's it. Causes of the French Revolution. They are hypocrites. That's the main thing. Now, when we talk about the Indian Constitution was borrowed idea fraternity from French Constitution, adopted all 6 constitutions. Nagaraja, we'll talk about that. Indian Constitution bolte, you don't become emotional. I will tell you, when I will show you Declaration of Right of Man and Citizen, you will see Indian Constitution was written very late, 1947, 47 to 49. By that time, things had already changed. So don't worry about that. We will see. I will show you Declaration of Right of Man and Citizen, and you will tell me articles. Polity, I know, is very, very strong. Don't worry. Okay. Causes of the French Revolution. There are 2 long-term causes or systemic causes. And second one is immediate cause. Immediate cause. Now let's talk about first the systemic causes. Now I'm going to create a certain picture in front of you. You have to please understand it, and therein you will understand. So let's try to understand France in 1700 and both political and social. Now, see, France used to follow what is called the 3-estate model of society. Estate means strata. You want to write strata or order or section. 3 strata based section society, and this is called the ancient regime. This is not the wrong spelling of ancient, it's the French spelling of ancient. Yes, or level, whatever you want to call it. So it's called the ancient regime. Here you have the monarch, the king, and the kings which France used to have come from a dynasty which is called the Bourbon dynasty. Not the biscuit one, but the biscuit has taken the name from here. Bourbon dynasty. And Bourbon dynasty, they were very kind to UPSC aspirants because they used to mostly take the name Louis the 15th and 16th. These are the 2 person who are very, very important to us. Louis the 15th and 16th. They should take Louis 1, Louis 2, Louis 3, 15, 16th. So easy for us to remember. Now this is very standard. This is very standard monarchy, Bourbon dynasty, Louis 15th and 16th. However, it is the structure, as I said, please write T in ancient spelling. Listen to me, Munna. I said this is not the English spelling of ancient regime. It's the French spelling of ancient regime. It's written like this only. It is not the wrong spelling. Listen to me. I said that when I was writing this itself. Okay. Now, there are 3 stratas in which the whole society is divided into. This is called first estate. This is called second estate. And this is called third estate. The first estate are the clergy. Are the clergy, which is basically church bureaucracy. The second estate are the nobles, which is aristocracy or relatives of the king. And the third estate is everyone else or common people. So this could include merchants, this could include artisans, and this could also include what we call as farmers, peasants, etc. Now the beauty of this system, and why it was so dangerous, was that they represent 1% of the society, they represent 1 to 2% of the society, and they represent 97 to 98% of the society. But ironically, when it came to property, 10% of all land, 10 to 20% of all land, and they got rest of the land. So one thing you can realize, that the money, the wealth is concentrated here. Concentrated here. And more than that, the people got the land which was not very, very fertile, very standard, useless land they got. Best land, close to 30 to 40% of the best land, was everything was with the clergy and the nobles. The church also used to own land in that regard. But the biggest issue in French society is that sorry, is that they pay no taxes. Again, no taxes. All taxes are paid by the third estate. So very simply, the wealthiest are not touched, the wealthiest are not taxed, and the wealthiest are the most privileged. This ancient regime, or the ancient regime, the problem is that the people are under a lot of burden. So based on this pyramidal structure, I can come to the following conclusions. Socially, the people are discriminated based on threefold estate model. Power and wealth is concentrated in first and second estate, and this is population. Third, all tax burden is on the poor section of society, So I can, in a way, argue that the common people were frustrated, discriminated, and angry with the three estate model. Will this conclusion be valid? Will this conclusion be valid? Yes? Anybody has any issue in understanding France socially? No? Anyone? Come on. Social profile of France. Anybody has any issue here? Okay. Now let's talk about polity. Let's talk about polity. If you're writing yes, sir, you have to tell me which aspect. Yes, political inequality, you can say, or rather social inequality. Social inequality, poverty. It is not like feudalism, because feudalism is very different to this. Feudalism is not based on this type of structure. 1% society, no taxes. 2% society, no taxes. 30% of land with them. 98% of the people pay all the taxes, have the worst land, and very simply, they are discriminated against. Okay. Social mobility is not possible. No process of social mobility. Okay. Now, when we talk about polity, the monarch is an absolutist or absolute monarch, which means that all power is concentrated in the king. And yes, this is systemic issues. Social mobility is not possible. Is not possible. Now, when we talk about representative institutions, there used to be a drama which is called the Estate General. And basically, under the Estate General, the three estates used to meet with the king at the apex. The first estate, the third estate, rather the second estate, and the third estate used to meet together, and very simply, though there could be, for example, 100 representatives, again a hypothetical number, and here you could have 800 representatives, because they represent 1%, 98%. The problem with this system is that if you go by the number of representatives, who should win the decision making when it comes to total number of representatives? Third estate. Vejshi will talk about monarchy dictatorship. There's a difference between consent and sanction. That's a different issue altogether. We'll discuss that. Third estate should win on numbers. But what they did was, they gave each estate one vote. So total number of votes was 3, and the first and second estate always used to come together to make it 2:1. So very simply, though there are more number of representatives, they are still given one vote. So 1% of society has one vote, 2% of society has one vote, but 98% of society still has one vote. I'll give you, can't understand, I'll give you a very simple example. Tagdiz, there are men and women in this class. There could be, for example, 18 women, 20 men. So if I say vote on something, who will dominate? The women, because they are more in number. But if I have to basically skew the whole concept, I can just say women have one vote, men have one vote. So now 80 people have one vote and 20 people have one vote. Basically, you can take whatever decision you want to take within yourself, but you can either say yes or no, one vote. So it's a simple, straightforward concept. You undercut the majority by giving everyone, every estate one vote. So basically, 2% of the society has two votes, but 98% society has one vote. So if there was any form of decision making, it becomes obvious that the second and the first and second estate would always dominate, because both of them used to come together and basically rally against the third estate. So Deepika, refresh. So very simply, the estate general is a politically discriminatory model. And more than that, the estate general had not been convened since 1614. Since 1614, it had never convened itself. So if I bring the political plus social together, can I come to the following conclusions? Which is that they are socially discriminated, social inequality, and third estate has all the burden. France, rather we'll not say France, but monarch is, or rather has, absolute power and all representative bodies are non-representative. Estate general did not convene after 1614 and was also designed against the third estate. So if I argue that there is political and social frustration, again, the conclusion would be valid. Yes. Yes, no, everybody's following me. Estate general did not convene after 1614, which is that they never called this representative body. And second is that it has been designed in such a way that the people get the least amount of votes, so they are discriminated more. So it's a socially and politically discriminatory system, which is based on frustrating the third estate, pushing all burden on them. All burden on third estate, all power with the monarch and first and second estate. Anshu, now clear? Okay. If people were discriminated, why were they were not doing anything for the due share? Now again, fourth point, Yash, I've repeated. Understand this point. This thing which you said, Ilma, which is that why were people not saying anything? See, this is a very 2023 constitutional person saying this, that why didn't they fight for it? You try to fight against a monarch, he'll get you killed. These are monarchies. Protest. We will fight against somebody. This is my right are not things which are used in ancient regime France. Please understand this point. That this 2023 individual who will protest on everything doesn't really make sense or cannot really operate in a 15th 14th century context. You go and protest, people, they will literally burn you and nobody will say anything also. So be very, very clear that these notions don't work. Okay, who vote in terms of third estate who are eligible to vote? What is the criteria? Again, that is of no purpose to you. The representatives are chosen from within. They are representing it. They can vote within themselves however they want to. Still, one vote will be counted for. But there's no eligibility here. They represent their own representatives. But why do you want to do a thesis on the third estate or the estate general when it will not exist only after 1789? Whatever I have written on the screen, these 4 points, are they clear other than unnecessary points which really don't matter to me? Okay. The number of commons are largest compared to first. They can protest against him. Rahul, again, this is your 2023 people say. Then very simply, there should never be any problem in any country then. People always outnumber. Then how is that only handful of Britishers ruled us? Then in 1700, when 1765 they got Diwani, 1800 every Indian should got up and slapped the Britisher. Everybody would have died from the slap itself. That is not the way things work. That people, there in that sense, every dictator, all dictators, only one man. He will have how much? 5 lakh army, but people are 10 lakh. Then this is again your innocence speaking. This innocence I will remove from you. If this is naivety called, this is called naivety, innocence hai, that you've read in polity that you have the right to protest, so you will protest, and then when somebody is going to protest, you will get rights. That is not the way history works. Throughout history, only one man has always ruled, and not even talked about that. When it comes to varna distinction, Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, do you think that the Brahmins were in a majority? No. It was always the smaller section dominating the other sections. That is the way who holds power. That's a separate issue altogether. We are not here to talk about that, but this innocence you have to remove from yourself, which is that, okay, I will protest, I will get something. Nobody really cares. And I'll tell you one thing. You go and protest right now. Will something happen? Will something change? You tell me. Are protests happening in India today? Yes or no? Yes, they are happening. Is everything changing according to protests? When in a democratic system, when you need a certain very big political will, as of right now, multiple people are getting killed across the world. Multiple people are getting killed across India. Have we all come together against that issue? No. So doesn't the earth is going to most probably heat itself so much that we will all die automatically? Still everybody wants to do. This is innocence. That for you, this is called hindsight 2020. That we looking back towards the French will say, why didn't the French rise? Why aren't you rising against all the discrimination which you feel today? Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, Russia, NATO, West, everywhere, Africa, everywhere, same situation. Okay, that is why we are here. Now, world history opens up your mind quite a lot. Okay, can I go to the economic now? Yes or no? Okay. Yes, Ritika, in a way, yes. Now, let's talk about the economic. When we talk about, sir, the monarch cannot rule without giving representation to third estate. He was not ruling with the representation of the third estate. That's a drama which he's doing. Economic. Monarchs and dictators don't get power out of consent. It's power which they hold generally. Fear. Okay. Or divine consent, church, this, that. Economic. Now, economically, the monarchy, second and first estate had no idea about the ground realities. And the Louis or the Bourbons had lavish lifestyle and overspending. On the other hand, artisans had very meager wages, long working hours, and when we talk about the peasants, there are famines in a rural countryside, riots for bread, which are called bread riots, food shortages, and multiple issues in agriculture. A very good example of this is that the wife of Louis XVI, she was once sitting in the Palace of Versailles. While sitting in the Palace of Versailles, she saw people fighting on the street. So she asked her servant that why are people fighting in the streets? So Marie Antoinette was her name. So the servant said to Marie Antoinette that people are fighting because they're fighting for bread. These are bread riots. They're fighting for bread. They can't eat bread. So Marie Antoinette argued that if they can't eat bread, why don't they eat cake? That is the level of dumbness and what we call oblivious nature they had, which is that she didn't know that cake is also made out of bread only. So the monarchy is having multiple overspending sprees, lot of money, but they're overspending also. And basically, if we talk about the economic situation, France is moving towards economic crisis and bankruptcy. And they have no central bank also. They have no central bank. So whatever Louis XVI, so whatever they have, they are borrowing it from people at very high interest rates. The simple straightforward point is artisans are under distress, peasants are under distress. The kings have no idea what is happening on the ground. Multiple famines will happen just before the French Revolution in 1788-89 itself. There's something called the Great Fear, which is going to be there, in which people thought that the first and second estate is removing the food so that the third estate dies. And there was a concept that the third estate will be killed of starvation. There's hunger, there's starvation, there's economic crisis. The monarchs have no idea about it, and generally no central bank is there. And that is the point which you need to understand economic. So if I add political plus social plus economic, that is a good question. I'll come to that. They were so dumb that they actually were bankrupting themselves whilst giving loans to the Americans. They started with a surplus of 110 million francs. And by the time the Americans got independence, they were at a deficit of 100 million francs. So they actually did not even understand their economic situation in the right way. So if I add social, political, economic, social discrimination, political frustration, and economic crisis. Add to it standard issues, which is corruption, non-functioning judiciary, church's power was strong, no commercial policy, no strong navy, kings were clueless, and you get all the systemic issues. Anybody has any issue in the systemic? I will read it out from the PPT because then I want to talk about the immediate. Now, do you get it why the French were so useless in India or were so late to come to India also? Which is that they had no clue what was happening. And when it came to Anglo-French rivalry, the English were very efficient. They were mostly writing, either they were clueless or writing constitution. That is the basic thing. Okay. Can I read it out from the PPT and now move towards the immediate causes? Okay. France was the last one to arrive to India, yes. Now, let's read this out. So when we talk about the ancient regime, heavily segregated and unequal society, the society was divided into three: clergy, nobility, peasant, and bourgeoisie. See, this word bourgeois or bourgeoisie, burgess or bourgeoisie is used for commercial classes. Bourgeoisie is not a Marxist term, it's a French word for commercial classes, middle class. So bourgeoisie is a word used for that. Thereafter, when we look at the way we divide the three, clergy is 1% of society, owned 10% of land, paid little to no taxes, state within a state. Basically, the church had too much power. The nobility, on the other hand, 2% to 1% of the society, 20% of the land, paid again no taxes. Commoners, 98%, divided into bourgeoisie, artisan, laborer, farmer, entire tax burden on them, highly dissatisfied because of corruption and feudal setup. State within state means that they are so powerful that within a French monarchy, they were within them a state within themselves, which is that nobody could touch them. They were very powerful. So it's about being very powerful within a state. Now on the yes, like the Pakistani army in Pakistan, which is basically a state within a state. On the eve of the French Revolution, second largest population, government was going bankrupt, taxation and collection system were faulty, reforms, if any, had failed. And when we talk about the economic causes or economic issues, extravagant lifestyle of Louis XV and XVI, they had fought unnecessary wars. You tell me, if there's a war for who will come to power in Austria, what does France gains out of this? What would France gain out of it? Nothing. If America got independence, what does France gain out of it? Again, nothing. So these emperors had no understanding where they were actually investing. So be it the 7 Years' War, be it the Austrian War of Succession, be it the American Revolutionary War, they had nothing to play for. They were gaining nothing. And their American colonies slowly but surely were also in a way becoming independent. No central bank, defective commercial policy, trade monopolized by guilds. Guilds are nothing but trade associations. No rule of law, corrupt judiciary, excessive public debt, faulty taxation policy. It's a good recipe for disaster. Now, There is no representative institution, inefficiency, corruption, lack of self-government, privileged groups opposed any form of reform. Now, add to this, why would the French fund the American Revolution? Because it was about weakening the Britishers. It was all Anglo-British rivalry. So the way France was going forward with 1780 seeing multiple famines, in 1789 multiple bread riots, multiple great panic, what we call as the Great Fear, bread riots, rumors that they were killing of people by starving them. So people were now attacking the aristocrats also. So the bourgeoisie were money lenders, businessmen, teachers, advocates. They had money, but they did not have power. The problem with the bourgeoisie is they have money, but they cannot have any form of social mobility. They will still remain the third estate only. They have meager hours, meager wages, long hours. Farmers are landless, hunger and poverty is what actually prevails. High tax burden is there. So socially and everything, if you see, it is a proper recipe for disaster. Now, if we understand these things, I would like to now talk about immediate causes. Immediate causes. Can I talk about this? Why lack of bread in this country? Multiple failure of harvest is going to lead to no wheat production, so bread is not there. Okay. Are we all clear with systemic? This is the question which is going to come in the examination. Discuss the causes of the French Revolution. Systemic causes, clear. How will we consolidate these points in the answer? You will write political discrimination, no representative institution. Socially, the three estate model was based on whatever I've given you is an explanation. Every point which is given in the PPT, you can write it as a point in the examination. So I have to explain it to you. That is, I'm elaborating it. In the end, once we finish French Revolution, I'll give you cause and significance on one slide. Don't worry. What is great fear? The fear that people are getting, the aristocrats are killing the people by starving them. There were no major industries in any country as of right now, except for England, which we'll talk about in Industrial Revolution. Okay. Now, immediate causes. The first one is something which you already know, which is the Enlightenment. Now, the Enlightenment, which impacted both America and France, was developing in France itself. And here, you have Montesquieu, you have Voltaire, you have Rousseau and Kant, along with Locke, who are arguing about multiple things. Montesquieu, Locke, constitutional government, separation of power, while Voltaire were arguing about separation of church and state. On the other hand, Rousseau, Kant, social contract. All of this added new feeling, increased the frustration, and the people wanted change. So if I bring in political plus social plus economic plus ideological, what I get is political frustration, social frustration, economic distress, and people with new revolutionary ideas. And this is basically the context for the second immediate cause, which is nothing but the American War of Independence. Because the French were funding it, France was now in debt, and we have the French monarchy is bankrupted, and the solution to this crisis will trigger French Revolution. Now, this is basically the gist of whatever we've been doing for the past 1 hour. Now, is this clear? Does this whole slide make sense? Because now I want to talk about the course. Now I want to talk about the course. Does this make sense? Does this make sense? See, as it says here, the French Revolution, the American Revolutionary War worsened the fiscal situation of France, spread of revolutionary ideas, and thereafter you have the French Revolution course, which I have to discuss with you. But till this point, do we understand what we're doing? Montesquieu, Spirit of Law, talked about constitutional government, separation of power. Voltaire talked about how superstition should be removed and reason should be important, rationality, and corruption in the church is not good. Talked about the king, if not needs to be changed, needs to be benevolent despot, do good for the people also. And Rousseau is the one who's talked about social contract, that man is born free but is everywhere in chains, which is the fact that once we are born into society, there are multiple ways in which we are tied down. All of these ideas will influence the people. So, what is written on this slide? Is it clear? I want 110% assertion from everyone. Half an hour, then storytelling will happen. Is this clear? Everyone, come on. There was no benefit of supporting the Americans. Yes, no benefit. Done? Okay. Social contract is the fact that we all give up certain amount of our liberties so as to create the states. The state is created from the people and not the other way around. Okay. Now what I want from you now is, if you're sitting, go into a relaxed position. If you're lying down, get a pillow. I'm giving you 1 second, 10 seconds to get a pillow, get some cushion, because now I want you to sit back and relax. Because very simply, the point till which you needed to concentrate and pay attention is over. Now you just need to chill and listen to the comedy called French Revolution. If you have become comfortable wherever you are, for half an hour, I want to tell you the Gatha or the Katha of French Revolution, which is only going to become more and more comical as it goes on. It is not my history, so it is comical to me. Maybe the French will not like it, but how do I care? That is the basic point. Yes. So I drew a lot of joy in telling this story. So ready to hear it? Everyone's comfortable. Half an hour of simple, straightforward storytelling. Tomorrow, what we'll do is we'll finish French Revolution, and tomorrow the last major big module, which is unification of Germany, Italy, heavy module, last major heavy module. Thereafter, everything is going to become easy. Okay. You can lie down, you can do whatever you want, you can take the phone, just listen to me, simple, straightforward. Okay. Constitution khelenge aap. So, now, the facts, the people, the names which are important, I will tell you later. Just enjoy it. So, scene set, opening act. The French finance minister, his name was Necker. And Necker goes to Louis XVI. And he tells Louis XVI that there is a problem. And the problem is that the French have bankrupted themselves in the process of helping the Americans. We started with 110 million francs, and now we are at a deficit of 100 million francs. So Louis XVI says to Necker भाई अब क्यों आया? Why have you told me this now? Why are you telling to this me now? What's the point of telling me now that we have already national debt? So what Louis XVI does is that he removes Necker. Standard thing, dismiss the person. Now Louis XVI appoints the next finance minister, and his name is Calon. His name is Calon. Now, Calon, Callone, Calon. Calon needs to find a solution for this crisis. So what he does is that he, rather than calling the Estate General, calls a smaller body of it. It is called the Assembly of Notables. In the Assembly of Notables, as it says, notable people used to come out of the first, second, and third estate. Matlab 4, 5, 6 doesn't really matter. Some notable people used to come. Now, to the Assembly of Notables, Calon says a very simple, straightforward thing. That France is in a fiscal crisis and we need to generate more revenue. What is the easiest solution to this issue? What is the easiest solution to this issue? Come on, tell me. Tax. But tax whom? Tax whom? Tax the first and second estate. But third estate already is squeezed. You cannot squeeze the third estate more. So Calon says that let's do one thing. Till we are in a fiscal crisis, he proposes that the first and second estate should pay some taxes. Simple, straightforward. Third estate can't pay more. Let the first and second estate pay some taxes. Once we have reached break even, we will stop taxing the first and second estate. Very easy thing. But now, somehow, the first and second estate says, we will not let you tax us. Let France go into a ditch. We don't care about France. We will not pay tax. Let the sky fall down. Let France go and beg to any other country. I, as an aristocrat, I, as a clergy, will not pay 1 rupee. I don't care. And this is called the aristocratic revolt or rebellion. The aristocrats said, no. Taxing us, no. Not possible. And this meeting will end with the first and second estate walking out. Now, people in the third estate, people start to get to know something is happening, something is wrong. Now, Louis XVI calls Calon and he says, what was the solution which you proposed? He said, tax first and second estate. Now, Louis XVI says, who asked you to do that? And Calon will again be removed. So this solution again cannot be done. Calon is removed by Louis XVI. So now Louis XVI will appoint within 3 years his next finance minister named Brigny. Now Brigny can't do what Necker did, which is to say the situation is problematic. Brigny can't do what Calon did, which is tax the first and second estate. So Brigny gets a must idea, gets a new idea. He says, let's do one thing. Let's call the Estate General. Hasn't met since 1614, but the people have changed since 1614. Let's call the Estate General. let the estate general meet and will again ask the third estate to pay more. So we have been making a fool out of the people previously. Let's do the same thing. Let's call the estate general, and it was decided that the estate general will be called in 1789, and therefore 1789 call the estate general and let the first and second estate outvote the third estate, tax them more, and solve the issue. Brinney had a perfect idea. But Brinney forgot about one thing, that the people in 1789 were very, very different to the people of 1614. Now, as I told you, the solution for this fiscal crisis will trigger the French Revolution, and you see how the French Revolution will now start. Everybody is with me till this point? No issue? 3 finance ministers, 3 different solutions. Perfect. Now, when the concept of estate general is proposed, the people of the third estate become a little bit restless. They know what is going to happen, which is 2:1. So the representatives of the third estate go and meet in the Versailles Palace Louis XVI. And they say to Louis XVI that, okay, we understand that for centuries this system has been there. Please give more representation to the third estate. So Louis XVI says, pehle bolna tha. You should have told me beforehand. Okay, if you are 600 or 900 representatives, let's increase it to 1100. I'm giving you a very hypothetical number. It's not the right number. It's a hypothetical number. He increases it by close to 300 to 400 more representatives. But increasing the representatives, does it change the number of or the vote share of third estate? No. Like you, the third estate also thought the same. So the third estate people said, okay, you are making us 1100, but give us one more vote. You make it 2:2. One vote to first estate, second, one vote to first estate, one vote to second estate, and 2 votes to third estate. At least we can balance the third estate. And we can balance the estate general. So Louis XVI said, increase, done, sanctioned, let me sign it. And then the people say, so we also get one more vote. And Louis XVI say, important kaam, some important work has come. I have to leave right now. I can't answer this question right now. I will answer this later. I have some very, very important work which has come through. I will see you later. So when it came to the question of increasing the votes of the third estate, he did not say anything. And now the third estate got to understand that he's just increased the representatives, but he's not given us that vote. So now the third estate decides that when we are going to meet on the estate general day, we will protest and we will not allow the estate general to go forward. And this information leaks to the first and second estate. And very decisively, on the day the third estate had to meet in the Palace of Versailles, they locked the doors of the Palace of Versailles for the third estate to not enter. And this frustrates the third estate representatives quite a lot. And they say, enough is enough. And what they do is that they go to the adjacent tennis court. He had an indoor tennis court. He's Louis XVI. So in the tennis court, the third estate members will meet and they will take what we today call as the tennis court oath. And what the third estate representatives argue is that today we change our name from the third estate to the National Assembly and we will not leave this tennis court until and unless we write a new constitution for France, which is based on democracy. So you see how Brigney triggered the French Revolution. Now the French Revolution has begun. The Third Estate has rebelled, and now it is saying we want a new constitution. We, as the National Assembly, will write the new constitution of France, which is the National Assembly will write the new constitution of France, and now France will become a democracy. The First and Second Estate realized that they had done a mistake. They will go towards the National Assembly. But if you're Louis XVI, would you be happy about the situation? Would you be happy about the situation? Obviously, no. So now the National Assembly has taken an oath to write the constitution. So what Louis XVI does is he starts to ask the army to move towards Paris, which is the capital of France. And now people can see who are on the streets, the army moving around. And now the French people can feel that the army will be used by Louis XVI to disband the National Assembly. So now the people start to squabble around in order to protect the National Assembly, saying that this is going to write a new constitution for us. And once people were looking for arms, one of the person will scream, "Let us go to Bastille. Let us go to Bastille." Bastille is their armory prison, Tihar jail if you want to call it. And basically, they say, let us storm the Bastille. And this is called the storming of the Bastille in 1789, in which people are going to storm the Bastille, break it. People who had been wrongfully put in the jails will be freed, and they will take out the arms out of the armory and take an oath that we today call ourselves the National Guard. The National Guard. And we will protect the National Assembly. And this is called the Bastille Day. Till today, in French history, it is called Bastille Day or their Independence Day in a way. And for which our Prime Minister recently went to France also. This is the context of the Bastille Day, in which the Bastille was broken and the National Guard was created, which till today exists. They will also adopt the flag of France, which is still today used, which is nothing but the red, blue, and white flag which they use today. So Bastille Day is the day on which the Bastille was broken and the National Guard was created in order to protect the National Assembly. Till this point, everything seems to be fine. Everything seems to be fine. That a new constitution is being written. But understand this point. Till this point, nobody has no issues. Bastille Day, Bastille, National Guard, National Assembly. I will tell you what to remember. Don't worry in the end. No issues. Now, tell me one thing. Does writing the constitution automatically solve your economic, political, social issues? I want to write a constitution. Will automatically everything get sorted? No. Now this, the French people did not realize. Writing a constitution is not a joke. It takes time. Now in June, July of 1789, the French Revolution has started. People, how does National Guard come into the picture? People want to protect the National Assembly. They take up arms. That is the National Guard. So June, July 1789, they start to write the constitution, but people are becoming impatient. People want change. And by August, people have become too impatient because the bread riots have again begun. The people are looking for change. The constitution is not coming. So the National Assembly, in order to calm down the people, they introduce a document which till today is considered the mother of all constitution, which is called the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. Now, if I will read the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen to you, who is Bastille, what is Bastille? Bastille is the armory jail of France. 14th July. Okay. Now, I'll read the Declaration of Rights of Man and of Citizen. You just keep our Indian Constitution in the background and think of it. First, these are the provisions of the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. Man is invested with some natural rights which he acquires by birth, such as right of individual security, right to freedom, right to equality, right to property. Law is the expression of common will and everyone is equal before the law. Nobody should be arrested unlawfully without a judicial order. The freedom of speech and press is guaranteed and the security of public rights is the duty of the state. The sovereignty was vested in the nation instead of the state or parliament. All people have the right to acquire ranks according to merits. Private property is an inviolable and unbreachable right. Nobody will be deprived of it. All are free to diffuse religion and thoughts provided they do not violate limits prescribed by law. Freedom lies in those activities that do not harm others. All officers of the state are accountable to the public. Do these provisions rather seem to be familiar to you? Yes. All are basically the basis for all fundamental rights we have. From double jeopardy to the fact that 15, 16, all. This document is considered a path-making document which will be produced in France. And this is one of the most important contributions of the French Revolution to our history itself, which is that the Declaration of Right of Man and Citizen will become the preamble for the constitution which they will write in 1791, which will make them the first constitutional monarchy of France. So they will become a constitutional monarchy of France in 1791, and the Declaration of Right of Man and Citizen is going to be the preamble for that. They will remove the ancient regime. They will remove every aspect related to the concept of whatever was the church's authority. And France had finally written one constitution which made Louis XVI the ultimate executive, and the National Assembly is going to change its name to Legislative Assembly. And once they will call themselves the Legislative Assembly, the monarch, which is Louis XVI, is going to become the constitutional monarch, and the Legislative Assembly is going to become the parliament below it. So, liberty, fraternity, equality were the principles on which this first constitution was produced, and everybody was happy about it. Everybody was perfect about it. Clear till this point how the first constitution is written and why the Declaration of Right of Man and Citizen is important. Okay. Now, small episode and then I'll leave you for today. See, France ideally should have stopped here. France ideally should have stopped here because constitution written, and now they should concentrate on implementing this constitution. This is where France should have stopped. Now, if I'm Louis XVI, would I be thrilled about this development? This new constitution which has come through? No. Now, Louis XVI, in the fear of people burning him alive, signed this document, but he was not very happy. So, what he does is that he sends a message to his fellow monarchs in Austria and Prussia that he says to Austria and Prussia that look what is happening in France. Dekh raha hai Vinod? That look what is happening in France. If you are not going to intervene, Same thing is going to happen in your countries also. I am Louis XVI, I am from France, but if you will not stop the French Revolution, you Austrian and Prussian king, then it's the same thing will happen to you and you will also become a constitutional. Now, basically, what Louis XVI proposes to Austria and Prussia is that you do one thing. You attack France, defeat the Legislative Assembly, and give power back to me. So basically, he's a proper traitor. He's acting like a traitor. See, because the power is with the Legislative Assembly, Louis XVI wants Austrian Prussia to attack France, defeat the Parliamentary Legislative Assembly, and then restore the power back to Louis XVI. Why would they give back power? Because monarchs scratch their own back. एक ही ताली के चट्टे बट्टे, as we say. That muhavara basically, that all of them have their own understanding. Will they give back power or not is a separate issue altogether. Austrian Prussia, very simply, all politicians are the same. Austrian Prussia, he proposed that you attack. Now, in the Legislative Assembly, two factions were developing. One are called the Girondinists and the other one are called the Jacobians. See, the Girondinists or the Girodians were the ones who were the allies of the king. They wanted constitutional monarchy and they controlled the Legislative Assembly also. But the Jacobians were headed by a person called Maximilien Robespierre, and they were not happy with the constitutional monarchy. They said France should become a republic. However, even before Austria and Prussia could attack France, the Girondinists got to know that Austria and Prussia are mobilizing their forces, and in 1792, these fools will declare war on Austria and Prussia. And from 1792 onwards, the French will now fight a war on two of their borders. Preemptive war. Now, if you are good in economics, is war good for economy? No. So these fools first write a constitution in 1791. Then by 1792 are at war also. And ironically, writing that constitution did not change the economy of France. France is still in a crisis and now they're in a war also. But the Girondinists still believe that Louis XVI was the man to do the job. But Maximilien Robespierre and the Jacobians, who are the lower strata of the people, they believe that no, there is something problematic in the way Austria and Prussia were, in a way, mobilizing. So now, what Louis XVI says, as soon as the war is started, he tries to flee France. And what he does is, one time he takes a carriage and reaches to the eastern border of France. Just before leaving the border, somebody identifies him and says, "Isko koi dekha hai. I've seen this person somewhere." And Louis XVI and his wife, Marie Antoinette, will be identified and brought back to Versailles. But now the Jacobians' internal conviction that there was something fishy was now becoming more and more obvious. Again, Louis XVI, in between this war, will move from his main palace, which is the Versailles Palace, to a palace which is called Tuileries. Tuileries Palace is on the eastern border, very close to the Austrian border. And he will again try to flee. So the Jacobians will rebel, and there is a moment which is called the storming of the Tuileries, in which the women, very actively women, because of the bread riots, were frustrated, will go catch hold of Louis XVI and bring him back to Paris again. Now the Jacobians will say enough is enough, and they will put in an inquiry through which they will find that it was Louis XVI who was proposing Austria and Prussia to fight a war with France. And very decisively, the Jacobians will walk out of the Legislative Assembly. They will form their own national convention, and they will try the king for treason. The king will be found guilty, and king along with his family will be guillotined. Guillotined is, you put the head of a person here. 1 second, I have a picture of a guillotine. Put the person's head here. Yes, you put a person's head here, and this falls. Basically, beheading. And the king will be killed. The another constitution will be written. 1793 constitution will be written, and the National Convention will replace the Legislative Assembly, and the second constitution of France will be written, through which it will become a republic. And it is here I stop today. But before you leave, I want to discuss 3 things with you. I hope in the process of telling you the story, you realize that there is no person alive. Marie Antoinette will also be killed. There is no person alive who can write whatever I said in 250 words. You try it, you will not be able to write it. So the examination cannot ask you, tell us the story of French Revolution, because the story of the French Revolution is very long and very, very messy. So tomorrow when I come back, I will repeat this story in much shorter detail. We will discuss the 1791 Constitution, 1793 Constitution in detail, but you will see, rather than implementing this Constitution of 1793, Maximilian Robespierre is going to derail the whole process, and he will start what is called the Reign of Terror. He will left, right, and center, like vegetables, start to chop up people. And between 1793 to 95, things will go totally off track. The whole French Revolution will be derailed, and by 1795, they will be writing another constitution, which will again get derailed. And in 1799, Napoleon will come back and capture power and bring stability to France. So this is basically the story. But before we leave, causes is clear. If it is clear, along with the American Revolution, cause and significance. If all of that is clear, thank you so much. I will see you tomorrow. Have a very productive day, and I hope all of this is making sense. You're understanding why am I saying that things cannot be asked, because they are truly messy. So, of course, nobody is really going to ask, right? Right. You can read the chapters in 9th class NCERT Ocean, but that is written from a different perspective in that sense, right? So, IS Live, you have to send Kishan, then it will come to me. Okay. So thank you. Why didn't they were not why didn't they follow the first constitution? Because too many things were happening. When you're too revolutionary, this is what actually happens. Okay. So if you don't have a question, thank you. I will see you tomorrow, 6 a.m. Don't be late. I will repeat this story again. Jacobians is the name which they take, which is coming out of the way the bourgeoisie used to identify. Jacobian is a word for middle class in that sense. Okay. My email ID. Email ID. Yes, the French are not capable of ruling themselves. Abhishek.mishra19@bible.com. Okay. So see you tomorrow. As I said, just revise this portion. Watch the video again if you want to. Tomorrow, core significance is done. Tomorrow, French Revolution will be over. We'll be able to do unification of Germany tomorrow, I think. Unification of Italy and Industrial Revolution, then most probably is Monday. Okay. Still, the story is quite a lot. The story is left. We've written only seen 2 constitutions. 2 more are left. Okay. Immediate causes, Janvi, are the intellectual, the Enlightenment, and the American War of Independence. Last slide, there's nothing written on the last slide. Rahul, which slide? I have not written anything. Everything is random. Okay. Jacobians. Look for that slide. Thank you. Thank you. I'll read it out of the PPT also tomorrow. This is the slide you want. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. See you. You have to send answers at islive@byju's.com. Don't send it to me. I cannot generate the ticket number, which will be then important for sending it back to you. Okay. See you.